Americans could soon get licenses to hunt cartel members as privateers. Now look, a proposal to bring back the programs of the past could create a new type of bounty hunter system that would let us, well, get government licenses to go and fight cartels and the profits. And also, meanwhile, President Trump has announced the rolling out of his plan to launch reciprocal tariffs on just about every country on earth. And in response to this, just about all these other countries are responding in different ways. And many are now discussing retaliation against the United States. And some of this could also include foreign actions against Elon Musk in particular. Also, U.S. Justice Department, under the newly confirmed Attorney General Pam Bondi, they have announced a lawsuit against New York, Kathy Hochul, Letitia James, over the state's handling of illegal immigration. We'll be talking about these topics and more today, so let's jump into it. First off, folks, it is now possible Americans, you and I, could get a license to be allowed to hunt cartel members. Members of Congress are now suggesting the letters of marque and reprisal going back to the early 1800s, these could again be activated. And the program under one of the U.S. founding fathers, President James Madison, this allowed people to receive a government license to become privateers or corsairs, to go and fight pirates. And it also allowed them to attack and capture certain enemy vessels. Maybe at the time it was boats. Now it could be cars or something, or maybe cartel houses. If this is brought back, it could create a type of bounty hunter system that would allow Americans to fight gangs and cartels and get paid to do it. Now look, the issue was first floated in a viral post on X from January. A thread from Mike Lee, he's a Republican senator from Utah, has so far gotten over 45.9 million views, and he raised an important question. Quote, "What are letters of marque and reprisal, and how could they be used to weaken drug cartels?" Well, he explains. In the thread, he explores the history of letters of marque and how they were issued by various governments, not just the U.S., and this allowed licensed private citizens to attack certain enemy ships during wartime and then bring home a cut of the loot. Now, on the point of whether that could be used here in the United States, well, actually it has been, and it's established in law. He states this: the U.S. Constitution authorizes these commissions in Article 1, Section 8, giving Congress the power to grant letters of marque and reprisal. While Congress, he says, hasn't issued one in over a century, the authority to do so still exists. Doesn't even go through the president. Congress could do it. And he's actually right. American letters of marque were actually issued under President James Madison, for example, and they did establish the legal use of this policy. In fact, one of these letters, issued for the War of 1812, gave an American privateer the legal right to, quote, subdue, seize, and take any armed or unarmed British vessel, public or private, because we were fighting the British mainly in Canada at the time, right? Now, as part of these licenses, there's also historical letters between James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, where they debate the legalities of these letters. One of these suggestions is you need to be in a war to do it. Well, we're at war with the cartels now, so maybe we could. And there has also been some more recent attempts to use this law. Recent history, in fact. Just following the terror attack, September 11, 2001, then Representative Ron Paul, he introduced a bill to, quote, authorize the President of the United States to issue letters of marque and reprisal with respect to certain acts of air piracy upon the United States on September 11, 2001, and other similar acts of war planned for the future. And even more recently, in fact, 2022, just a couple years ago, Representative Lance Goodman introduced a bill to, quote, authorize the President of the United States to issue letters of marque and reprisal for the purpose of seizing the assets of certain Russian citizens and for other purposes. And we actually have seen the United States and other countries seize certain assets of Russian citizens, for example, the yachts of the oligarchs, using very similar measures. But, back to the current proposal from Senator Mike Lee. He writes that, quote, Using letters of marque could be a novel but effective response to unique threats posed by drug cartels, especially in response to threats by the cartels to target U.S. planes returning illegal immigrants to their countries of origin. And he argues that Congress could issue these letters to allow private security firms or certain citizens to intercept cartel operations, especially those involving, human trafficking, drug trafficking, and the like. And he also notes that using private entities will let them respond and adapt more quickly and would also cost taxpayers a lot less because the payment they would get would not come through our tax dollars. The payment would be basically a cut of the value of whatever they managed to capture from the cartels. And remember, there have been a lot of issues where major cartel bosses have been captured, like El Chapo, for example, and the money kind of gets frozen up in the system. Trump has suggested America should be able to use that money to maybe pay the families of victims of, fentanyl, for example. But typically the money just gets frozen up in the cases. What if the money were used to pay people to go after them? That's a big question, right? Now the Post goes on to, bring some other attention. It got the attention of the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., and he wrote this on X. He said, quote, "If you're looking for an effective, efficient, DOJ-compliant way to combat Mexican drug cartels, especially those now threatening to target U.S. planes deporting illegal aliens, you will really like this thread proposing letters of marque and reprisal as soon as possible. There's a possible solution." Now, it seems this wasn't just kind of a viral thread either. Fine, say something that sounds kind of out there, get attention. It wasn't just this. Senator Mike Lee appeared on the podcast of Breitbart editor-in-chief Alex Marlow to discuss this even further. Watch.
Letters of marque and reprisal, marque there being spelled M-A-R-Q-U-E, are authorized to Congress as an authority under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 10. This is a tool that allows Congress to designate a particular enemy or problem zone and to authorize what are called privateers, essentially pirates operating with the permission of the United States government through a letter of marque and reprisal issued by Congress. It allows them to go out and attack and undermine those entities, to retrieve spoils from those entities outside the United States, and to the extent they can make it back into the United States, they get to keep a cut of the value of the loot they recover. So when we're dealing with these amorphous entities like international drug cartels that are actively working to poison Americans, to undermine the rule of law in our country and sometimes in adjacent countries, this is a tool that we ought to consider. And I think it's a tool that we perhaps ought to use with respect to international drug cartels that have been flooding the United States with enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in America. In fact,
this isn't just talk. There are now efforts to make this into a reality. A bill for this has now been introduced to Congress, just on Wednesday, in fact. House Bill 1238 was introduced by Representative Tim Burchett, a Republican from Tennessee, and it's being co-sponsored by Representative Mark Mesmer, a Republican from Indiana. And it aims to, quote, authorize the President of the United States to issue letters of marque and reprisal with respect to acts of aggression against the United States by a member of a cartel or a member of a cartel-linked organization or any conspirator associated with the cartel and for other purposes. Now, in my personal take, this may sound far-fetched. When I first saw this, I was like, that won't happen. But looking into it further, actually, there is some legal basis for it. The idea of giving licenses for American citizens to go and hunt cartel members or their proxies for profit, right? You can make a business out of it. It's actually not that far out in terms of existing U.S. law. In the United States, as we speak right now, we have private security companies. We have license programs for private investigators, giving them access to information the average citizen would not be able to maybe access, or even abilities of investigation that you and I cannot normally have. We have private military contractors who can get licenses from the government to go and fight in actual wars. We already do that. We also have a bounty hunter system. In fact, the United States is one of few countries on earth that still has a private bounty hunter system, And people can actually get deputized and be legally allowed to track down and arrest criminals if, for example, they try to skip bail. We already have these things. And the idea of having people licensed to track down and arrest cartel members and get a cut of the profits, well, it would probably fall somewhere between a bounty hunter and a private military contractor in terms of like legalities, right? And this is in addition to the fact that Trump actually already issued a day one executive order that designated the cartels and actually a lot of different gangs as foreign terrorist organizations. That's actually still being implemented, but he wants to designate them as specially designated global terrorists. And Trump actually has already made the order on that. That is now in the works of being implemented. Now, look, also on that point, remember that Canada has now also echoed that policy from Trump. As part of their 30-day deal to delay the Trump tariffs, Canada has also now designated the cartels as terrorist organizations, or at least moving to. And Canada is also now taking stronger actions to shut down drug and human trafficking operations. We're also now getting details on a massive fentanyl and assassination lab that was operating in Canada. This was tied to China. It was tied possibly even to Iran. Let me show you this. Zero Hedge said this: Canada's last-minute decision to cooperate with President Trump on border security and efforts to curb fentanyl trafficking was a key factor behind the president's 25% tariff threat. While Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has pledged to strengthen border security, a former U.S. official who led an anti-fentanyl task force under President Trump's first term has argued that laws in Canada hinder a proper crackdown on the flow of drugs in the U.S. And he said this: well, several months ago, you had the biggest lab in the history of the world taken over by Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Vancouver. He said it made Breaking Bad look like minor league. This is from former State Department official David Asher telling Canada's state-funded CBC News chief and political correspondent Rosemary Barton in an interview just last weekend. It notes this: Asher claimed that fentanyl super lab, this massive lab they found in Canada, quote, was definitely connected to Chinese organized crime, and also pointed to possible connections with Iran and even rogue biker gangs. Which actually do operate heavily between the U.S. and Canada, by the way. And he added this, quote, definitely there was some ties to Chinese organized crime, possibly Iran as well. And it actually goes further than this. In addition to the drug operations, the criminal network involved in that Canadian drug lab was also allegedly tied to an assassination network, killing Americans, targeting Americans. Here's David Asher of the Hudson Institute explaining this to Canada's CBC.
I think they know they're sitting on a big scandal here. The fact that this thing emerged and it's tied into these biker gangs who've been hired to go down to the United States in some cases and assassinate people like, my former boss, Secretary Mike Pompeo, President Trump, and others. This is another whole level of scandal.
Now, on that point, remember, he's saying this thing was tied to Chinese organized crime. Chinese organized criminal organizations are deeply tied in with the Chinese Communist Party. In fact, the CCP even has a whole government branch to manage this called the United Front Work Department, meaning this has government ties, foreign government ties. And if it's also tied in with Iran, as he says it might be, well, that's also significant because remember, Iran was trying to assassinate President Donald Trump when he was on the campaign trail. We're now getting information, 2 possible attempts on Trump. And the regime has also put out an assassination hit, many of them, in fact, on Mike Pompeo and others, Iran. This is publicly reported, in fact. Now, it was also uncovered that Iran uses gangs to carry out assassinations. They don't do it with just, Canadian assassins or Iranian assassins. They do it by going to gangs, organized criminal groups, and then having them do their dirty work. And this allegedly includes gangs like the Hells Angels and others. Remember, in Canada, they said that lab was tied in with rogue biker gangs, right? Which does seem to align also with the information now coming out from Canada. This drug lab, everything they found, the assassination networks Iran possible ties, but also definitely Chinese organized crime. Now, look, folks, we'll find out what happens with this, but major stuff is being uncovered, especially as Canada is at least saying, we'll see if they do it, at least saying they're going to start taking moves to go after these fentanyl networks, cartels, and others. And the United States is also now diverting some of its military resources from Europe because they're trying to wind down that war in Ukraine between Russia. And they want to move the U.S. military more to focus on border security, focused on maybe making a blockade to prevent drug trafficking, and also maybe focusing more on undermining the CCP's efforts to try to, wage war against us. Now look, in other news, as the Trump administration moves to cut government spending, and as Democrats try to block this, Elon Musk has posted a video showing older recordings of Democrat officials seeming to kind of push for the same policies we're now seeing him try to put in place. Watch.
This report tells us how to cut waste, cut red tape, streamline the bureaucracy, change procurement rules, change the personnel rules, and create a government that works better and costs less.
I've read it, and where it says the president should, the president will.
Among the 800 recommendations, eliminating 12% of the federal workforce, merging some government agencies like the FBI, the DEA, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, closing hundreds of government offices outside Washington.
From the day I took office, one of the commitments that I made to the American people was that we would do a better job here in Washington in rooting out wasteful spending. We thought that it was entirely appropriate for our governments and our agencies to try to root out waste, large and small, in a systematic way. It means cutting some programs that I think are worthy, but we may not be able to afford right now. A lot of the action is in Congress and legislative, but in the meantime, we don't need to wait for Congress in order to do something about wasteful spending that's out there. We haven't seen as much action out of Congress as we'd like, and that's why we launched on our own initiative the campaign to cut waste. And we're going to keep on finding every possible way that we can do that, even if Congress is not acting. There you go.
Those quotes from Obama are particularly important because, look, among the big arguments right now is that we're in a constitutional crisis. And many Democrats are now arguing that cutting government spending and shrinking government agencies, that's the role of Congress. Undermining that, bypassing that, well, they say it's a violation of the Constitution. And they allege that the president does not have the power to do that. That's the big argument in this country right now. But the older video clips, the ones I just showed you, suggest that there is, in fact, legal precedent to do what Trump is doing right now. In fact, even Obama talked about it, as you just saw. Although, arguably not on the same scale that Elon Musk and Trump are doing it, right? You could argue the scale is different, but the legal precedent is in place. In other news, folks, not everybody's so happy about the peace deal that Trump's trying to negotiate between Russia and Ukraine. Remember, for example, Pete Hegseth, he's talking to people in Europe right now. Marco Rubio, now Attorney General, he's also now having meetings out there, and they're trying to negotiate peace. They want to bring an end to the war between Ukraine and Russia. And there are a lot of people who don't want that. German officials in particular are now saying there can be no, quote, imposed peace. How dare you try to force us to be peaceful? Look, Reuters said this: there must be no imposed peace in Ukraine, and any solution to the conflict must involve the United States. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said in an interview with Politico released on Thursday, but conducted a day earlier, and said this, quote, "It is very clear to me that there must be no solution that does not also involve the U.S., Scholz said. Because remember, Trump is saying they want to end the war, have Europe handle Europe, and America wants to have less of a footprint in Europe. Germany is saying America has to stay involved and no peace unless America stays. Scholz also added, quote, "The next task is to ensure that there is no imposed peace." And Germany is talking about keeping the war going, maybe even supplying Ukraine with more weapons. Now, in addition to Germany stepping forward to oppose the peace deal, which could see Ukraine actually lose some territory to Russia, they would actually lose out to an extent. Something was kind of seen as something that was seen as not on the negotiating table before all this. But also, as we're watching this, right, we could see Europe be asked to handle more of its own regional defense. German politicians are also now discussing consequences against Elon Musk in particular. They want to possibly do something to harm Elon Musk. Germany right now, they're accusing Elon Musk of interfering in German politics because Elon Musk spoke at an event of the Alternative for Germany party, that's the AfD. Now, the German media, they frame that party as being far right. Others have argued the label is just a name that does not reflect the actual policies of the party. You could argue that it's like anti-mass migrant. That is an accurate statement. But in terms of policy, it's kind of like center-left by American standards. But the big argument is that the AfD is rising in popularity, and it's being framed as a populist party. It has been heavily censored in Germany and throughout the entire world to prevent the rise of its popularity. But Elon Musk is being accused of undermining that because he gave it a platform, both by not censoring it on X, but also because he spoke at one of the party's events. And that, of course, gave it a lot of global attention. And he did the same thing, at least being accused, in the UK, where he brought attention to the grooming gangs, the politicians covering it up, and the fact that you have these rape and grooming gangs that have been legally protected by the British system. That's also something Elon Musk is bringing attention to, and is being accused also of undermining their political system by doing that. And they claim it's, spreading racism and such, right? But now what's happening, the front runner for the German elections is suggesting that Musk could be punished for this. Wall Street Journal said this. It said, the man likely to become Germany's next leader warned that Elon Musk would face consequences for boosting the far-right Alternative for Germany, or AfD, through his ex-social media platform, and said this, quote, what happened in this election campaign cannot go unchallenged. That's Friedrich Merz, the front-runner in polls ahead of the February 23rd election. And he told this to the Wall Street Journal, referring to what he sees as Musk's interference in Germany's election. Now, notes that Musk has repeatedly called on X for Germans to vote for the AfD at the coming federal election, saying that it could save the country. And he held a freewheeling conversation, it says, with AfD candidate Alice Weidel on the platform, and later addressed a campaign rally live on video. In fact, you watch the video, he didn't go there personally, but they had his face on the wall and he spoke by video. Now it says, asked whether the consequences facing Musk after the election could affect Tesla, whose only European gigafactory is in Germany near Berlin, Merz said this, quote, I am deliberately leaving the consequences open for now. Now, of course, we'll have to see what Germany does and whether this includes some type of punishment for Tesla in Europe. But this will likely also overlap with a trade war that could soon be brewing as well, because Donald Trump is now promising reciprocal tariffs. And guess what happens, if Germany punishes Tesla? Germany and Japan have maintained their post-World War II tariffs on American cars. And Trump is saying that has to go away. If, for example, the only way to get around that is to have a Tesla factory working in Germany, well, maybe that will go away, and maybe Germany will have to face, equal tariffs of all of its vehicles in the United States unless they buy ours. This is something Trump is talking about right now as we speak. Now, Trump is talking about equal tariffs on pretty much every other country, on every product, including vehicles. And on that point as well, Trump just held a briefing at the White House where he announced the rolling out of his plan to launch what he calls reciprocal tariffs, and this is for just about every country on earth. Watch.
And on trade, I have decided for purposes of fairness that I will charge a reciprocal tariff, meaning whatever countries charge the United States of America, we will charge them, no more, no less. In other words, they charge us a tax or tariff, and we charge them the exact same tax or tariff. Very simple. Nobody knows what that number is unless you go by the individual country. You can see what it is if you go to the individual country and you look at what they're charging us. In almost all cases, they're charging us vastly more than we charge them, but those days are over.
In response to this, other countries are also now discussing possible retaliation against the United States. And some of this could also include foreign actions against Elon Musk in particular, because they see Elon Musk as kind of the open target because he's, again, a businessman and he has business deals with a lot of these countries. They're talking about going after him individually. Now, this is Canadian lawmaker Jagmeet Singh of the New Democratic Party proposing this on CNN. Watch.
The first step is going to be dollar for dollar retaliatory tariffs. Impose a tariff on us, we'll impose a tariff back on you. Again, no one wins in these trade wars. But this is not a fight that we wanted to pick. We were happy to continue to have a strong relationship. Donald Trump has picked this fight, so we're going to fight back. We just announced today, what I would do is put in place a 100% tariff on Tesla, directly targeting Elon Musk. Because Elon Musk is proudly touting this idea of the 51st state, so let's hit back at Elon Musk. I've also said we should shut down the supply of critical minerals. Another move that directly targets Elon Musk and his Tesla company. The batteries that he needs require these critical minerals. We've got tools, and we should be ready to use them. It's not something that we wanted to do, but if Donald Trump wants to bring this fight, know that we are ready. I'm putting Donald Trump on notice.
On that point also, part of Trump's actions include an executive order that imposes a 25% tariff on foreign metals, and that starts on March 12th. And that tariff in particular, that is causing issues with countries throughout the world, although each one is kind of responding differently. Some countries are promising retaliation, others are panicking, others are looking to build closer ties with the United States in order to strike deals to avoid the economic fallout. And Trump saying, we don't need any of you because we can do it domestically. Now, Newsmax said this. It said the European Union and Canada vowed to retaliate firmly. Here's one quote from Trudeau. It says, our response will of course be firm and clear. And notes that Trudeau told this to AFP as Canadian steelmakers warned of massive disruption from Trump's move. In Mexico, it says, the third largest steel exporter to the United States after Canada and Brazil, a top minister urged Trump not to destroy 4 decades of North American trade ties. In Brussels, European Commissioner Chief Ursula von der Leyen warned that unjustified tariffs on the EU will trigger firm and proportionate countermeasures. Luckily, they already banned most of our goods in Europe, so this may not affect us too much. It notes that Brazil, for its part, said it had no intention of entering into a trade war with the United States. Despite President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva having vowed reciprocation if Trump imposed tariffs. Brazil's kind of backing off a bit. South Korea, the 4th biggest steel exporter to the United States, also vowed to protect its company's interest. And acting President Choi Sang-mok said that Seoul would seek to reduce uncertainties, quote, by building a close relationship with the Trump administration and expanding diplomatic options. They want to move closer to the United States to avoid the damage of this. And notes as well, a spokesperson for the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said London was engaging with our U.S. counterparts to work through the details of the tariffs. And notes as well, in Monday's executive order, Trump also said, quote, all imports of aluminum articles and derivative aluminum articles from Argentina, Australia, Canada, Mexico, EU countries, and the UK will be subject to additional tariffs. And that's a big deal because some of those countries, that's like the bulk of their exports. Australia in particular, which is a major mining country. And notes that Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the United States was considering an exemption for his country after he spoke to Trump by phone. And so Australia may get an exemption. We'll see what we get in return for that. But look, it says the tariffs also appear to indirectly target China, with the executive orders detailing how Chinese producers are, quote, using Mexico's tariff exemption to funnel aluminum into the United States. The CCP is working with Mexico to basically subvert a lot of our trade deals. And Trump is calling him out on it. In fact, even during the Biden administration, they're calling him out for it. Now, in addition to all of this, Mexico also seems to be very unhappy about Donald Trump renaming the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America. And the Mexican president is now urging Google to reverse its actions because Google has now officially changed the name on its maps. And she also suggested that Mexico could file a civil lawsuit against Google if it doesn't switch the name back to the Gulf of Mexico. There's a bit of a international dispute over that name change. But look, on Trump's part, Trump is also enforcing the new name. He said, don't dead name the Gulf of America. And he has denied even AP, right, a media, he's denied them access to 2 White House events because they refused to use the new name. Now, look, on this, folks, we reserve the right to decide, it says, let me show you this.
We reserve the right to decide who gets to go into the Oval Office, and you all have credentials to be here, including the Associated Press, who is in this briefing room today. I was very upfront in my briefing on day one that if we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is. The Secretary of Interior has made that the official designation in the geographical identification name server, and Apple has recognized that, Google has recognized that, pretty much every other outlet in this room has recognized that body of water as the Gulf of America, and it's very important to this administration that we get that right, not just for people here at home, but also for the rest of the world.
So in other news, the U.S. Justice Department has announced a lawsuit against New York over the state's handling of illegal immigration. I'll be talking about this more after I come back from a 1-minute break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. The United States government under Donald Trump is now suing the state of New York. Now look, the U.S. Justice Department under the newly elected Attorney General Pam Bondi has announced a lawsuit against the state of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul, New York's Attorney General Letitia James, and also DMV Commissioner Mark Schroeder over the state's handling of illegal immigration. This is AG Pam Bondi announcing this lawsuit. Watch.
New York has chosen to prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens. It stops today. As you know, we sued Illinois, and New York didn't listen. So now you're next. Millions of illegal aliens with violent records have flooded into our communities, bringing violence and deadly drugs with them. And that's why President Trump has directed this to stop. And if you don't comply with federal law, we will hold you accountable. We did it to Illinois. Strike one. Strike two is New York. And if you are a state not complying with federal law, you're next. Get ready.
Now, a big part of the lawsuit is around New York laws that let non-citizens, including illegal aliens, apply for driver's licenses, which also, by the way, ask you if you want to register to vote. The 2019 law also prevents the DMV from sharing records with immigration enforcement, meaning they kind of block immigration enforcement from knowing about this unless there's a legal order. And that may be illegal for them to do. It's also possible we could see lawsuits like this against other states as well, frankly, because there are several other states across the country, including California and a long list of others, that have similar laws to this. This may be illegal. And this is also happening notably as New York State is trying to give voting rights to non-U.S. citizens, allowing people who are, again, doing this to start voting in our elections. That said, folks, hit the like button, share this episode, leave a comment, and let's jump into some questions. First off, from Ashley from California. You're saying, let me get this right. We're pulling our military out of the war we didn't have any military in. You're talking about Ukraine. Okay, to make that clear, the United States did have some advisors on the ground that we know of. I mean, it's possible we had other stuff, but without a doubt, we did have some military advisors. In terms of what Germany's talking about, saying that there can be no peace in Ukraine unless there's some kind of U.S. involvement, technically the U.S. is involved in the peace deal, right? That is happening right now. And so what Germany is talking about is not U.S. involvement in the peace deal. It seems what they're talking about is U.S. involvement in post-war Ukraine and maybe post-war Russia. Now, what the United States is talking about right now, Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense, he's saying that Europe is going to have to handle this going forward. America is going to have a smaller footprint in Europe. It's no longer one of our main priorities. NATO can handle itself. Look, we've had this kind of post-World War II situation where we've been hand-holding a lot of these countries. They can walk on their own now, and it's time for them to kind of take care of their own. That's the message being sent. The United States is also telling European NATO allies, which would include Canada as well, actually, and a few other countries, now telling NATO allies they have to start paying 5% GDP for defense because we're not going to do it for them anymore. Now, a lot of European countries are very concerned about this because certain EU laws prevent them from spending a certain amount of money. And if they exceed a certain amount of their GDP on other expenses and so on, or if they go a certain amount into debt, they face punishment from the EU. What the Trump administration is saying now, look, fine and dandy, if you don't want to pay for your own militaries, deal with the consequences because we're not going to do it for you. You don't want to defend your countries, that's on you, not on us. And Trump is also telling them right now that, look, we're not going to be there anymore. You got to deal with it. We're tired of paying your bills for you. We're going to start even, tariffing you just like you tariff us. No more fining American companies, no more denying access to American companies, no more doing that and then expecting us to buy all your stuff while you don't do the same for us. All that's coming to an end. And the message being sent to a lot of these countries is basically, if you can't afford it, then manage your budget so you can afford it. And for a lot of those countries, that's kind of a real shot over the bow because that probably means they have to get rid of some of their socialist policies. It means the welfare states. It means maybe even like the free healthcare stuff. It means a lot of the extra benefits they get because of the money they have, that it will go away. They will no longer enjoy that because it's been kind of an illusion this whole time, supported instead by the American taxpayer. Now, on that front, in terms of post-war Ukraine, the United States does not want to have any troop presence in Ukraine after the war ends. That's also part of the message being sent by the Trump administration. And this is a bit of a diversion from what was previously discussed. It was looking like America would be part of the rebuilding efforts in Ukraine. It was looking like we'd have to maintain a long-term troop presence in Ukraine. Trump is now saying that's not going to happen. If that does happen in any form, it's going to be Europe doing it. And it's going to be in their hands how that looks, how that works. Maybe at most we might have some trade deals. Volodymyr Zelensky's talking about maybe having rare earth mineral mines and allowing the U.S. access to some of that. But Trump's also talking about trade deals with Russia. Also working with Russia more closely, which strategically, if the U.S. is diverting some of its resources to focus on threats of mass illegal immigration and drug trafficking and possibly waging war on the cartels, and then also focusing on threats from China, if the United States were to get closer to Russia and maybe move it away from China a bit more, it would be better for everybody. And I think that's kind of the argument coming out right now. KM Bold 1, you're saying, Joshua, do you think Elon Musk, is as concerned about consequences for Tesla as the rest of the world seems to be? You know, so Elon Musk is in an interesting position. Elon Musk bought Twitter and changed the name to X. Twitter, or X now, is facing basically pushback from every country on earth that likes to censor its citizens. You have Brazil forcing its censorship laws on the United States. You have the United Kingdom forcing its censorship laws in the United States. You have most of Europe in general forcing its censorship laws in the United States. Asian countries, China. I mean, I guess it's banned in China. But, you know, pretty much most of the world, Canada, even parts of the United States, the Democrats have been trying to bring back, you know, censorship to Twitter or X. You have a lot of this taking place. Elon Musk put himself in a very difficult position business-wise and reputation-wise by saying he wants to create a free speech platform. And he's dealing with fines, he's dealing with legal attacks, he's dealing with all of that. Now, I'll get into Tesla in a minute. But if you understand the position he has put himself in, he is basically standing against the policies of many governments around the world. Now, you could say the easiest way for him to avoid that would be just to work with them and agree to censor. He has been forced to do that to an extent, as have a lot of other platforms, like even Facebook, and Zuckerberg's dealing with that. A lot of search engines are dealing with that, especially the laws coming out of Europe, and they're getting fined millions upon millions upon millions of dollars on an ongoing basis, which Zuckerberg himself, he says it amounts to basically tariffs by other names. Meaning, of course, that if they want to deal with this, if they want to protect their companies from these foreign attacks, they need to work with Trump. They need to work with the U.S. government. The only way these private companies can resist these foreign government attacks is if they have another government basically treating this as a diplomatic or international trade issue. The only hope they have is to have one country, and probably the U.S. government is only powerful enough to do this globally, have the U.S. government do it for them. Some people allege that the reason a lot of the big tech, oligarchs, I guess you could call them, Zuckerberg, Musk, and others are kind of getting closer to Trump is because they want to protect that. That's one argument. Is that the whole truth? I don't think so. I think Elon Musk is actually, in particular, is very ideological. I think he genuinely believes in free speech, and I think, frankly, the reason he even bought Twitter in the first place was to, he wants to protect free speech. I think that is true given the attacks he has undergone and given what he's been doing. The other side of this, though, is Tesla. Now, from a business perspective, Donald Trump does not really seem to support electric vehicles. A lot of the electric vehicle market globally and in the United States is supported by basically government subsidies. It's supported by laws that want to maybe in the future ban gas vehicles like you have in, for example, California. It's about government subsidies trying to create charging stations all across the United States, which they have here. That was under the Biden administration. It was policies to try to inhibit the petroleum industries and the gas industries and so on. It's about European policies on the green future and everything. Technically, that benefited Elon Musk. It benefited Tesla massively. And you could argue that Elon Musk, now siding with the guy who's kind of dismantling that, is not a very smart business move. If you want to talk about personal interest, Elon Musk working with Trump, who does not seem to really believe in the the electric vehicle future, and is even eliminating a lot of those policies, including like the Paris Climate Accord and stuff. You could argue that it's not in his interests, actually. And so what he's doing, in my opinion, goes against his financial interests. Now, some are arguing that as part of his Doge activities, he's actually auditing departments that were auditing him, right? He's investigating the investigators. The other side of that argument is that Trump and others would argue those investigations were only taking place as a kind of like legal punishment and that Musk may not have been targeted in the first place had he not gotten involved politically with Donald Trump. And so, believe which side of the political narrative you want to believe, but that's kind of the situation. In terms of Elon Musk now facing punishment from other countries, though, I think Elon Musk is a bit concerned because, Germany, for example, talking about punishing him because he's getting politically active in Germany, backing the AfD party, which is probably not going to become like the front runner party, but it might have a stronger footprint in the country. When, again, as we mentioned, the only place in the EU where you have like a Tesla factory is in Germany, and Elon Musk needs that factory to get around European tariffs and such on American vehicles. Well, it goes against his interest as well. But you could also argue that Trump's promise of trade war and reciprocal tariffs could actually help Elon Musk a lot also, because a lot of countries will refuse to purchase American vehicles. A lot of them put 100% tariffs or pretty high tariffs on American vehicles, and Trump telling other countries they need to stop doing that, or we're going to tariff them just as much. Well, you could argue that actually does help Elon Musk, and you could argue he's kind of hiding behind Trump a little bit. I mean, I don't think hiding behind, but working with Trump on that side is a way to alleviate that pressure. In my personal opinion, Elon Musk, if this was really about profit, he would have been better off not getting involved politically, which to me means there's not a profit motive, personally. I think that if he didn't have these, if he wasn't pushing for free speech or political issues, he'd probably make a lot more money, frankly, right? And Trump has said the same thing about himself, that, why would you want to put yourself behind the guy who gets attacked in the media, I mean, I don't even know how many times a day, every single day of the week, and put a big target on your forehead like that? Why would you want to do that to yourself unless you genuinely believed in what it represented, right? That's the other argument. Melissa Perna, you're saying, how can they retaliate? You're talking about Europe talking about retaliation. They are charging us the same amount already. That's just ridiculous. If you want tariffs to stop, then stop charging us. Well, and this is kind of what Trump is betting on. We already trade at a massive deficit with most countries. I think Trump said there's only a couple countries on earth that we do not trade at a deficit with. America, in terms of domestic production and domestic capability, we can be self-sustaining when it comes to American steel. We can be almost self-sustaining, maybe not on timber. We could probably buy it from like Latin America or something like that. We don't really need Canada. We could be self-sustaining even on rare earth minerals if we wanted to actually open the mines, but it's so environmentally damaging that we don't really want to do it. We can be completely independent when it comes to most manufacturing, even high-tech chips and so on. In fact, we even gave those machines and capabilities to the countries that manufacture most of them. Those came from American capabilities that we just gave to our allies. We don't really need a lot of this. And, that's kind of the message Trump is sending to these countries. Look, we could basically completely cut off trade with a lot of these countries, and we would literally be better off. Trump has come out and said that to a lot of them. Not only that, but if you want to talk about, the offers America has in terms of, options for trade, because remember, trade is not just like you can, turn it off, turn it on for most countries. Trade for a lot of countries is established networks and so on. America has massive systems in place to facilitate global trade. Because remember, we're kind of isolated with, an ocean on our east and west, again, connecting us to Asia and Europe. A lot of other countries, they don't have to have, maritime trade. It's not really necessary for them. They can do overland trade for a lot of their stuff, or regional trade, closer trade. America, because it's so big, and because we have an ocean dividing us from most of the world, other than Canada and Mexico, a lot of our trade is maritime, meaning our ability to just trade with a different country and change the port we land in, it's not that difficult for us. if we lose trade with Germany, we can easily go to like El Salvador or Argentina or something like that. If we lose trade with Mexico, we can very easily get the same goods from somewhere else or do most of it domestically. In fact, even in terms of American manufacturing and jobs, it would kind of be better for us in some ways. Even if we lost all timber trade with Canada, we could just buy it from Brazil. Like, it's not that hard for us. And so, for America, because we have all this trade system in place, it's very easy for us to just, facilitate trade with a different country if we lose one of them. And so losing trade with one particular country is not the end of the world for us. Whereas for a lot of these countries, it kind of is the end. It's economically devastating if they lose it. And that's kind of the way that Trump is going about these negotiations. Hey, if you don't want to trade with us, we'll buy it from somewhere else, probably cheaper. Go for it. You already fine us every year. You already do this to us. We don't really need most of what you're selling in the first place. We have other options. That's kind of what Trump is coming to the table with most of these deals. And frankly, it's working, I think. And I think what you have as well is you have a lot of countries that have become so used to being able to, strong-arm America and having the United States kind of fold to whatever they say. They're not used to this. They're not used to not being able to, threaten us or so on like that and have us fold. Trump is really kind of holding the ground on a lot of those negotiations. You could argue that some of the businesses are going to be unhappy because there are facilities in place like, warehouses and other systems in place to facilitate this, not to mention, individuals who have jobs at these companies who may be in both countries or one or the other country. And so some of that would need to be disrupted. But overall for the United States, you could argue that, this is not going to affect us too much. If anything, almost any of these deals would make us better off. And that's the message Trump is sending. Like, we're tired of trading at a deficit with all of you. Work with us or just we're not going to work with you and we will literally be better off. That's the message being sent, right? Let's see here. Belliator Pro Deo, you're saying, in regards to USAID, how can a U.S. judge order the deletion of discovered evidence of a crime? Last I checked, that itself is a crime. So the judge right now is not really going against... so you're talking about the case of the New York judge ordering a freeze on, kind of the investigations and ordering the destruction of evidence. That judge is talking about the U.S. Treasury. I don't believe that applies to USAID. There are other things in place with the USAID, based not on deleting information, but on saying that Elon Musk and the Doge department that they have, or the Trump administration, that they have to keep allowing the money to flow. That you can't just pause all these DEI programs and ESG programs and everything else. They have to allow all these businesses and all these NGOs and everybody else and all these programs that don't even have a description telling us what the money's even for. You got to allow all that to continue. That's the USAID one. The U.S. Treasury one, basically what's happening with the U.S. Treasury. A New York judge has stopped the Doge department from investigating the U.S. Treasury and has ordered the Doge department and also the head of the U.S. Treasury to stop the investigations and to also destroy any evidence they may have so far collected. The legal ground the judge is using for that is that the investigations expose personal identifying information. Social security numbers, personal information, home addresses, and so on of individuals, government employees, and the like, right? And they're arguing that exposing personal identifying information is a violation of the law, and you cannot keep that. And so, because you cannot keep it, you have to destroy the evidence. That is the legal argument being used to prevent the investigations of the U.S. Treasury. On that note, that's going to keep going back and forth through the courts. You're going to keep seeing articles, Trump prevented yet again, Trump allowed yet again, and you're going to be hearing that probably every week until it goes to the Supreme Court. It's being debated back and forth, and I'm not gonna keep giving weekly updates on that because it's kind of like nonsense reporting. The reality is it's not going to have a big impact until it goes to the Supreme Court. So I'll keep you updated a bit, but again, we'll watch what happens on that. Boy Cochina, you're saying, why would the world use our dollar as a reserve currency if they don't get security out of the deal? Yeah, okay, so that is one of the big arguments with the US dollar. The US dollar does not provide military security. The US dollar provides financial stability. And one of the big arguments with the US dollar is, despite everything else, it is still the most stable global asset. And people look at the last administration, the Biden administration, and say, geez, US inflation, trade wars, all these problems, global shipping crisis. The Biden administration was saying inflation was not that bad. This is the reality of it. We did deal with terrible inflation. We had what's called stagflation. They kind of swept that under the rug, saying the stock market's doing better than ever. And the Biden administration was coming out saying the US dollar is doing great. Now, Republicans were saying the opposite. They said, no, the market is terrible, the economy is terrible, the US dollar is not doing well. It kind of depends on how you look at it. If you look at it just from an American standpoint, yeah, the last few years were rough financially. Yes, the U.S. Treasury and also the Federal Reserve were trying to basically save us from economic fallout. And a lot of that had to do with COVID-19, trade lockdowns, global trading crisis, and the like, right? And not to mention just overspending and so on. The comparison they had was this. The U.S. dollar actually did fare significantly better than any other currency in the world. And because of that, the U.S. dollar is seen as pretty stable. The value doesn't fluctuate massively. And if you understand what a lot of global, not even just investors, but just people who have money often do, they want to put their money in stable assets. This is one of the reasons why a lot of Chinese nationals buy real estate in other countries. They buy American real estate, they buy Canadian real estate, they buy European real estate, is because they want their money in a hard asset. It's why some people buy gold. It's why some people buy silver. It's why some people buy luxury items, diamonds, and so on, because it's a hard asset that can stabilize your money, stabilize the value. And especially if you're dealing with countries that are seeing a lot of trade disruptions. The Chinese yuan, when you understand the real estate crisis, the manufacturing crisis, the social problems they're having right now, their currency is not stable. It's very unstable. If you understand the possibility of sanctions, especially as they get involved in wars, for example, Russia, Ukraine, and Gaza, and the fact that they're getting sanctioned with that, their currency is not stable, meaning people want to get their money out of the country and into stable assets. Same thing with Europe. Even aside from Trump's trade wars and threats of reciprocal tariffs, the European economies are having a lot of trouble right now. Same with Canadian economy. It's not stable. It's not doing so hot. In fact, even just Trump threatening, trade war on them really impacted the Canadian dollar. And so, if you understand this, a lot of investors will put their money in stable currency, hard assets and stable currency. And despite everything, the US dollar is still by far the most stable currency. Now, in terms of tariffs, if you watch the show Primetime, which again airs tonight, by the way, if you haven't watched it yet, that's myself, Roman Balmakov, Tiffany Meyer, Chris Bob, Cindy Druk here with NTD. It's a great show if you haven't seen it yet. One thing that Roman brought up during a recent episode was that if you create tariffs and you start kind of playing these trade wars, and even if you want to do that, one of the effects of it is it actually can devalue your currency. And one of his arguments was that maybe that is something Trump wants, because if we're trying to rebuild domestic manufacturing, you know, businesses will move their manufacturing to the countries with the lowest costs. The cost of manufacturing in America is pretty dang high, mainly because of our currency. And so if we were to devalue our currency in relation to foreign currencies, it would actually make us a lot better fit for domestic production, domestic manufacturing, and domestic business. In our interest, it would actually be good for us. The counter argument for that would be, well, stability of the US dollar, and the US dollar is the world reserve currency. But again, the other argument would be that if we did that and renegotiated trade deals and put tariffs in other countries, it would affect all the global trade as well, meaning the US dollar would probably still be very much the most solid and most stable and most highly sought after currency, despite all of that. And so to the point of that, the US dollar offers stability. And for a lot of people, that is why it is regarded as the world reserve currency. It offers stability. And if you understand that a lot of countries are facing basically major economic crisis right now, aside from the problems they already have, but especially because of Trump's threats of reciprocal tariffs and rebalancing trade deals, the US dollar is still, maybe even more so, the most stable currency, which is why it's probably not going anywhere. Science Chick 72, you're saying the Marxists actually have a playbook design. Once you know it, it's easy to recognize. That is totally accurate. Some people have pointed to, I believe it's the 72 plans of the Marxists. You can read that list in the book, The Naked Communist. They've actually written it out for us. And many people, such as Yuri Bezmenov, a former Soviet defector, has also come out and exposed the way that basically the communist world wants to subvert and undermine the free world. And that includes undermining, if you want to break it down, it effectively comes down to destroying religion, destroying culture, destroying the family unit, destroying education, and destabilizing the capitalist systems, businesses, foreign trade, and so on, using things like fraud and crime and workers' unions. I'm not saying they're all bad, but you know, that is one of the things they do, and so on. And then also destroying people's faith in the systems of government, which ties into, of course, ideological subversion and demoralization. And so they kind of want to sow chaos within societies and destroy people's faith in the institutions that maintain free societies. And then by doing that, also corrupting them, you know, polluting them, making them not effective by creating movements that basically undermine it, or getting their own people into it to basically destroy them from within. The Fabian Society is one of the organizations that kind of openly does that, by the way. Then that is basically what they do to undermine the free world and cause people to lose faith in essentially freedom and begin demanding a more authoritarian, totalitarian system, which the communists then use to, you know, offer their plate of what they've been trying to sell to you the whole time, right? Come with us, and you'll be equal. You'll be equally miserable, but you'll be equal, right? Under the great boot of Big Brother communism, right? That's what they're offering to people. That said, folks, thank you so much for being here. Join me again on Monday because it's Friday. I hope you all enjoy your weekend. Don't forget also, we now have a new show. It's called Prime Time. That airs tonight, so be sure to watch it, check it out. Let me know what you think about it also. Also, please don't forget to share this episode. Give us a like. It does help us quite a bit. As always, folks, thank you so much for being here. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.